Right, so now we're going to start a painting of Pear. This would be a relatively simple painting, and I want to keep most of these first paintings that we do relatively simple so that we can concentrate on using color and how to approach handling the brush and applying the paint. So this part just kind of developing the image some. So I'll just let you look at this. And if you want to, you can draw along. This part will be in real time, but I will speed the video up from time to time when it gets to a point that we don't need to look at every stroke. So if you're painting along, you can use the image that I sent to you um, of the green pear and try to start putting it in, or you could have already done this. And the good thing about having a video like this, you can look at it over and over again as you need to. Now, if you have problems drawing, you might want to just sometimes just take the image and trace it in so that you can get the image to look exactly or as close to the image that was sent as you can. But these are relatively simple images, and I think you can all draw this kind of thing. I'm using burnt umber for the outline, and when you draw an outline like this, or if you're drawing anything on a canvas, I like to use the paint, but some people like using pencil because it's a little uh, more precise for them. So if you like to use a pencil, that's fine. As you paint, especially with acrylic, because of the uh, thickness of the application that you may use, it will cover if you don't draw, really heavy. But if you use paint like this, you can always paint over certain areas. So you can keep adjusting the image. Um, the more you get and you draw, the more time you get drawing, and the more precise you can get with your drawing, the better. Uh, Sometimes I'm more precise than others, and then sometimes I just kind of sketch the image out to kind of get it in place, and then I start painting it. This is a alla prima method where we're just kind of attacking the colors as we go and then adjusting. I'm using the lemon yellow and some of the cerulean blue to start the image just to kind of get a bluish green down. I'm using this paint with the brush and mixing it relatively closely. But if you are holding your palette down, you can use a palette knife and mix the color more precisely in little pockets of color. But I'm doing this way so you can kind of see the color a little bit more. I should be using, and I didn't think about this until after I got done with this, because I'm using the same brush that I used to kind of draw the line in. I could be using a larger brush, um, and you can also use a little water as you're putting the paint on, so that gives you a little bit more of a translucent base. But the reason I'm using this color as thickly as I want is because I want this application to be relatively thick on the painting. So I think right now I'm looking for a larger brush, a larger flat brush, because you should always paint with the largest brush that you can for any image that you're working with. Okay, so I'm getting a larger flat brush now, so I can make these strokes a little bit better. Now, the other thing I want you to observe is that I try not to mix the colors or rub the colors in too much. You can see I was blending them there a little bit to try to get a little bit of more of that green set up in that area. On the first coat, you want to try to fill the area that you're working with. You can leave out, you see, I'm leaving some areas out kind of as highlight areas, but they'll come back in and paint color over those areas also. The other thing, as we're going here, the paint that I'm using here is, or the type of paint that I'm using is more the student uh, mode. So I just jumped a little bit here so we won't spend a lot of time and did it quick. So this is just kind of filling in the background. You can see kind of the color that I'm using is a little brighter than the color that you will see on the image that you have. But we're going to go back over this, and you can see that it's relatively sketchy right now. But what you want to do is, very often when I see people paint, they paint the object that they're looking at and don't really paint the background, or they just kind of paint the object and wait till the end to paint the background. What happens is you don't know how the painting of the object that you're working with will look if you don't have the background kind of started, at least in general, because all colors are relative. That is, that green looks a different way on a white background than it does on a bluish gray background. So, in order to really judge the way a color will look, you need to paint all parts of the painting as you go. So that's one thing I want you to kind of get started with, is always kind of painting the inclusive parts of the painting and not just one object, and finish it off and then kind of paint another object. Now, these are 8 by 10 inch canvas pieces, and I want to keep it small so we won't have to worry so much about trying to fill in large areas. The first few paintings that we do will be just simple color studies, so that we'll get, hopefully, if you haven't done this before, used to just applying color. So I'm painting in the table here, and I'm using the warm yellow, the cadmium yellow, and some red, and that gives me a pretty nice kind of a ochre color. The good thing about using these complements and just the basic primary colors is you begin to see how many colors you can make by using just the primaries. Now, as you go along, you may start buying more color, because you'll see that there are certain colors that it's very difficult to reach without having the actual tube colors. Some of the purples are difficult to get to by just mixing. Some of the greens you may find in the tube are a little more difficult, but you can usually get almost any color by using just the complements. But as you paint more, you'll start realizing that there's some colors, you can do a shortcut by just getting the specific color. But we'll start with these primaries first. Okay, so I'm painting in the table, kind of roughly, just to kind of get the general uh, colors in and fill that in. Okay, so I'm adding a little burnt umber to this mixture, and well, I guess adding the white here so that I can get the lighter area. So this is where the light is coming in, and while this bottom coat is still wet, I'm placing the color on top of it so that it can kind of blend. So the actual color that I mixed is mixing with the base color some to help it become a little closer to the color that I'm using. So that's even if the mixture color that you make is not exactly right, by mixing it on top of a wet version of the base color that you're using, you get a little bit better mixture. So be quiet here. We're just basically filling in this area. When you're trying to make straight lines like this, it's always good to use a flat brush and get the brush as close to the size of the strokes that you want to apply. So now I think I'm mixing, yeah, a little bit more of the yellow ochre color. And I'm putting in some of the burnt umber to make that really dark crevice or under the box inside. So that's burnt umber, the yellow ochre, and some cadmium red. And anytime you're doing something like this, you can be uh, relatively free with it, and you know it's good to paint the general image and then kind of adjust it with the background and in the foreground. So the pear is going to change shape a little bit more too. You'll see as we go along. Okay. So where I'm getting close to where the object is going to change, I start making it a little darker. So I add a little bit more of the burnt umber and give it a little variation and look at some of the edges, adjust those. Okay, so I've jumped a little bit. I've drawn in one of the areas. So you'll see where sometimes when we get to a point with something, we don't need to show everything. So now we're mixing some more color to go on the pear. This lemon yellow that I'm using is a relatively transparent color. I am going to get another lemon or another cadmium light for the cooler yellow because this color doesn't cover quite as well as I'd like to. Or if you find when you buy a lower grade paint, what will happen is it will have more filler in it. It doesn't. It's not more. It's not as pure a color, so sometimes it doesn't cover quite as well, and that can be a blessing or a hindrance at times. Sometimes it's good to have a color that's more transparent. Sometimes it's much better to have a color that is more opaque. So you may find that you get a color like this yellow, this lemon yellow, that is transparent and doesn't cover very well. You can add a little bit of white, and that will make most colors, will make all colors a little more opaque, right? But it also makes the color a little lighter, so you have to adjust that. So, okay, so now I'm putting in a mixture for the shadows. So I'm using a little more of the ultramarine blue, and I'm graying down that yellow. So I'm always using this lemon yellow for most of the surface that I'm putting on the pear for right now. I will probably use a little warmer yellow, so when I want to get into the shadows later, you'll see. So also, the application of color does not have, you don't have to blend everything in. You can put color in and let it sit and make adjustments by changing the color slightly, but you don't have to rub it in and blend it. Sometimes they have variation of the colors as you put them on is what allows you to get more of a surface quality. I'm also trying to paint around the object, so you'll see that the strokes that I'm making are attempting to follow the contour of the pear as I see it. Right? So the strokes I'll make, I'll go up and around, and so I won't paint something that is uh, cylindrical like this and paint straight strokes. The strokes go the way that the object goes, because you can start seeing those strokes and they make some difference. Okay, so we're jumping here again, and you can see that I put a little bit of a some warm yellow spots on the shadow area. This is so you get some variation between the dark area and the lighter area, or the area that the light is shining on. Okay, so I'm using a little bit more of the yellow, cadmium yellow, for cadmium yellow medium for some of the shadows. And I'm looking at the painting that we're copying, and I'm trying to get some of the shapes to be a little more like the actual shape of the pear. So as I'm painting, I can see where there's some areas that are not as good, or they're not drawn as well as they should. So I'm trying to draw also. You can also indicate the outlines of things, of objects, by as you're painting them. So as I go along with this, I'm adjusting the shape and the form. And some of the colors that I put in, like the cadmium yellow that is being mixed into the background area, uh, is a little bright now, but we'll be scumbling over some of the areas as we go along that will allow those colors to go down some and not be quite as bright. So the other thing is you always should remember is you can always take uh, you can adjust color. So if you put a color in, you many times you want to put something in so that you can see the difference. It is better to be a little bold with your colors and then come back and adjust them uh, than to be too flat with them. Because you want an object that has some volume. So I'm trying to pick up a good amount of that lemon yellow now, and I'm adding a little white to it, and I'm adding a little bit of the cadmium yellow also. I'm going to get a better setup for our next painting and see if we can see more of the palette. Okay, so now this color is a little yellow, so I'm trying to get in between that green and the yellow. And so I'm getting some more blue in that yellow mixture and trying to take it closer so you can see me putting some colors in and then adjusting it. And then I'm going back and adding a little more, and I think in this case, cerulean blue for the lighter areas. And so I get this more of a green color. You can see and so I'm painting over some of the yellow, but leaving some of it in. And I'm trying to build the surface of the object. So put a little bit of the lighter color in, but now I'm doing what's called scumbling, where some of this paint is still a little tacky. So I'm rubbing the paint in so that even though this is a lighter color when it's applied on the light side, when I scumble it into the wetter area of the dark color, it blends a little bit and takes the color down. So that gives the object or the shape that we're working with, the pear in this case, uniformity. So I have some of the color, I'll have some of my basic color of the object, which is the green of the pear, well, needs to be in the shadow area so you don't look like you have a cutout. So I'm trying to make sure that all of that color is adjusted in the light and dark area. And so I'm putting a little bit of the warmer yellow, and I'll kind of go over some of this, but I'm putting it in so that it also unifies the color on both ways. So if you're painting one object, um, you should not have one side where the shadows are, unless they're very dark shadows and a painting that has very high lights and no color in the shadow, you don't paint anything that doesn't have a little bit of the light color in the shadows and some of maybe a little bit of the shadow colors in the light. Now I'm moving again where I've kind of tried to blend a little bit of these colors, and you can still see that this is a little more yellow than I want it to be. So I'm coming back in now, and I'm pulling up. I'm getting a little more yellow here, as you can tell. But what I'm trying to do at this point is see the shape some and uh, construct or chisel out some of the shape with the color. So as I put that really bright yellow in, uh, you can see more of the form. I'm making a concerted effort to look at the way this pear is shaped and to put the colors in that help to form that shape. What you should do as you're painting is to try to have fun with it. In other words, don't worry about, like, if you think, well, maybe this is getting too bright or too much of a different color. Uh, let it go and go through it. That is, you can always adjust. That's the good thing about painting is unless you start making a lot of mud, then you can always adjust things. So that's why we approach it where we only put kind of a stroke in. We don't blend it a lot. We blend it some, obviously, you can see that, but you don't want to rub into the paint because you have more of a structure, and you can see some of the green even below the yellow. But I see the green, and so I can use that as my way of getting back to the color that I want. I'm using some cerulean blue and the lemon yellow. And so now you can see that this is more of a green color that I'm putting in. And I'm going to work that on top where I can keep some of the yellow where it should be. Now there is another painting method where you use grisaille, which is a kind of a drawing using color underneath the painting, and you use one color, and then you kind of glaze on top. So we'll look at that method also. That gives you another form, and some people have different approaches to things. So you may see that that is a more useful useful method than maybe this is for you. But we'll try to approach both of those ways of painting. Okay, so I'm adjusting the shape a little bit more again. And this is burnt umber and a mixture of the green, which is, in this case, I'm using the warm, which is the cadmium yellow, and a little bit of the blue. I'm using some of that blue that comes from the light side of the lemon yellow and the cerulean blue, and I'm trying to adjust that kind of okay, yellowish green on the dark side there. So I'm still trying to shape and form the object. So I'm almost trying to sculpt the object. So you can see that the way that you handle the brush strokes, the way that you pull them across the object that you're working with, has a way of actually helping to form the object that you're working on. So these strokes on the edge here are kind of coming out. So I'm kind of drawing around the shape, and I'm pulling the brush into the kind of brownish, the kind of yellowish green that I have there, and I'm kind of blending them by having a semi-dry brush. I'm cutting the shape down a little bit here. And this area, the color on the shadow may look maybe a little dark, but it's not. So the lighter the light you have, so if you want something to look like it's very brightly illuminated, or that color, that the light source is very bright on an object, the shadows have to be darker. So the lesser the light source, the more uh, that the color in the light and the color in the shadow will be close. The greater the light source, the higher or difference there will be between the shadows and the light. So now I'm putting a little bit of actual blue in here. When you're looking at objects, when we start actually using real objects and you look at them, you will see little tinges of certain color, um, and you can exaggerate those a little bit when you paint. You'll see certain artists that exaggerate the color quite a bit, because what you're trying to do when you're making a painting is to um, make an make something that is representational of the object that you are doing or you're working with, and so you can take some liberties. Now that light that's the lighter area that's in the shadow is a little um, too bright. So we're going to see if we can bring that in focus a little bit and make it look more like it's right on the object. So I'm putting in some of the warmer color darker color so that it looks like it's along that shape, and I'm trying to make sure it works. Now I've jumped a little bit here again, and I'm painting the background again to make sure it's a little closer to what we're trying to get to. And it seems as though I close this on out, and you can see all the different colors we're using. We're using some more green on top, and we're scumbling the color in and using